All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages, I am Beast Mikey. You've now arrived at my train of thought. Let's get into these power rankings. Where does your team stand? I will talk about all 32 and, of course, the 8 games of interest, 2 per tier. Let's get started with the Fulton, Kentucky Zombie tier. New Orleans, respectable efforts. For the second straight week, it felt like New Orleans had an opportunity to tie and or win the game at the very end of regulation, and for the second straight week, they didn't get it done. Yet at the same time, they're not looking completely awful. They're just the least talented team in the league outside of a couple guys, but they are, well, and maybe Tennessee can enter that chat, but they're not looking awful. They're looking like they are going to fight in all 17 of these games. Again, they may lose 15 of them, but they're going to fight in all 17 games, and that's commendable. You're not that far away from a quarterback, New Orleans. Just stay the course that you're currently on. Unfortunately for you, there's somebody in your division that's also looking not great, and that's Carolina. O-line concerns. They've already lost 2 starters. Robert Hunt for the season, who was probably, I would say, their best offensive lineman with a bicep injury. That is a devastating loss to a Panthers offensive line that has looked absolutely awful to start the year. And Arizona did not mince words or mince actions. They proceeded to do their thing against Carolina. Now, to be fair to the Panthers, Arizona, for some reason, played with their food, and Carolina did try to come back at the very end. It just wasn't close to enough when Bryce Young needed to have it at the very end of the game. And it's a shame that Chuba Hubbard can't really run the ball either, but again, that's offensive line issues, unfortunately. New York Giants, James Hudson game. When you have 4 penalties back to back, it is saying something. And you've really done something for that to happen. And for Hudson to not really take much accountability is also a really wild flex on his part when 2 of the penalties are unnecessary roughnesses and the other 2 are false starts, all 4 of which probably avoidable if you're just a disciplined player. He was not. Even with all that, Malik Neighbors, Russell Wilson, and Wan'Dale Robinson all cooked the Cowboys secondary, and the Giants, for the most part, outside of these hilarious penalties by Hudson, looked kind of sort of decent. Now, I don't know how many wins they'll get with this, but they look kind of sort of decent. I am a little concerned about Tyron Tracy, though. Cleveland, proper punching bag. We probably should have seen this coming. We probably should have seen this coming, especially with how the Ravens lost to Buffalo. It was inevitable that Cleveland was going to be the team that would catch a whole lot of the beatdown that was coming. And that's exactly what happened. And Joe Flacco looked his age, unfortunately, and the Browns looked kind of sort of incompetent on the defensive side of things. On the offensive side of things, I should say. The defense actually did an admirable job. It was just when the dam broke, it was done. And for Cleveland's sake, unfortunately, that seems like that's what's going to happen a lot, where the dam's going to break and that defense can't stand no more. And that's going to be a wrap. Speaking of defense, the New York Jets. Defense is regressing. Back-to-back games, back-to-back 30 pieces, and both of which at home. Not great. Aaron Rodgers will do that to a lot of people, but at 41, he shouldn't be able to do that easily. And, okay, Josh Allen has destroyed the Jets for a lot of his career, but that felt effortless. And it really wasn't even mostly Josh Allen. James Cook was also a very good tag team partner in this beatdown that the Jets took. Even worse, Justin Fields is probably out for this week against Tampa and has suffered a concussion. So we don't even know when he'll return. We'll see how serious the concussion shall be. Miami, IHOD is closed. I'm going to miss using that phrase. The International House of Doom is what I called it whenever New England came to Miami, especially early in the season. But unfortunately, it must be done. Miami lost to New England, and yet again, the defense did not look good. Sure, the offense looked mostly good for 3 quarters, and up until effectively the last 2 drives of the game for the Dolphins offense. Tua, Waddle, Hill, and Achane all did relatively well. The offensive line from Brewer to the right didn't look great. Salvanea also struggled to some degree, but the offense looked relatively decent when Tua had a respectable pocket. The defense, still not there. And it's good to see and hear that Chop Robinson should be okay after the dirty hit that he took from Morgan Moses towards the end of the game. That's good to hear that he should be relatively fine. That's cool. The pass rush is somewhat looking respectable. Good work by Bradley Chubb especially. But defense has to get way more stops, especially on third down, to be way more effective. A defense that's also getting cooked, and this over the last 5 quarters, Chicago. Brutal 5 quarters. Yo, this is concerning, Chicago. This is really, really concerning how the Vikings and really J.J. McCarthy and Justin Jefferson absolutely shredded the Bears the second Randy Moss was on the Manning cast. And now we probably should have seen this coming too with the Lions after they got destroyed by the Packers. We probably should have seen it coming that Detroit, whoever they were going to face at home to the following week, was going to get absolutely obliterated. And that's effectively what happened here. Detroit didn't even have to try to get the 52 points. And that should be the worst part about all this. They didn't really have to do much of anything except for be somewhat efficient. We got Sonic and Knuckles doing their thing. Jameson Williams cooked. The only one that really didn't do much damage was Sam Laporta. And to be honest, he didn't really have to. Jared Goff did the work. Chicago, yikes. You got some things to fix, and fix ASAP. And Tennessee, can't judge Cam. And here's why I say this. Okay, Cam Ward hasn't really flashed except for a couple of plays here and there. That touchdown pass was completely insane. We threw across the body but going completely across the field. That was insane. But where I can't judge Cam Ward is pretty simple, honestly. The rest of that roster, aside from Justin Simmons, Calvin Ridley, maybe Tony Pollard, and maybe a couple other people, where's the bright spots? Where are we going with this? It's a large concern for Tennessee, which is why I keep saying they need another year of drafting and another year of free agency before I could really say, all right, Tennessee might be on their way. But until then, to be honest, I can't truly judge them. I can't really judge him. And an offensive line's getting him absolutely destroyed. He's already been sacked almost a dozen times. That is not good as we're going to the third week of the season. No bueno there for Tennessee's offensive line. Now to the game of interest in Zombie Tier. First, starting with the Dolphins and the Bills tomorrow night. And it's effectively sink or swim for Miami season. And it feels like if things go really bad, it might be the very abrupt end of Mike McDaniel and maybe even Chris Greer. Because let's face it, the fan base, and I can speak to this because I've seen it and I am one, it is not in a good spirit at this moment in time. However, you beat Buffalo, and I think the momentum changes. Now you're looking into the next 10 days because you have a Monday night game after this, and with confidence and with actual belief that, okay, this can be saved. Get obliterated by Buffalo, and it's like, okay, the nuke is coming. When's the nuke coming? As for Buffalo, do what you've generally done against Miami, and the nuke will be pressed. Josh Allen has owned the Dolphins over his career, let's be honest, and though there's no Matt Milano and there's no Ed Oliver, can Buffalo still stop the run? Buffalo has not been able to, even with Milano or Oliver. Can Buffalo stop the pass? And Baltimore obliterated them, but the Jets did not. Where does Miami fall on this scale? Tua's done well in Buffalo over his career. He just hasn't won there. Can he finally do that? If so, I think he'll save the detonation. And then there's Cowboys and Bears, and this could be high scoring because I don't trust either of these defenses to get stops. They haven't shown it in the last few quarters. Dallas, and I'll get to them in a little bit, got obliterated by Russell Wilson and company, while Chicago, as I just mentioned, got obliterated by both division rivals they played. I'm not sure either defense can get stops. So which tag team will do better? Or I guess it's a six-man tag, if you will. Dak, Pickens, and CeeDee Lamb versus Caleb, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze. Moore and Williams and Odunze have actually played really well to start the year. Dak and Pickens also played solid with some CeeDee Lamb mixed in. So which six-man tag will win out? And can Dallas stop Montez Sweat and any sort of pass rush the Bears may bring? So that's a question I will need to see answered, and will get answered later on Sunday. Now to the Birmingham, Alabama Monkey's Paw Tier. Houston, late game issues. Now, yes, I could have focused on their offensive line being terrible, but that's low-hanging fruit. I could have also focused on the absurd amount of penalties that secondary caused on Monday night, because That was crazy how many penalties they were called for, whether it's holding, pass interference, or illegal contact. It's a shame, too, because I love that secondary. But I got to focus on the late game stuff here, where both, in Houston's case, they had a chance to win the game on offense in week 1 or preserve the game on defense in week 2, and in neither case were they able or successful to do that. That's a bit concerning to me, as well as the other stuff I mentioned. And when it comes to the Texans, they're losing ground and fast, and surprisingly to the Colts, who have played so well thus far this year. Indy obviously will not be in this tier, but for Houston to stay out of zombie tier, they're going to have to get it together and fast. New England, solid when clean. When the Patriots aren't making mistakes like false starts or getting boggled up with penalties or not getting the ball to Travion Henderson, they're generally okay. The Patriots seem to know what they're doing, and they seem to be rather efficient and well coached simply because that's just the way they do business, and that's good. That's a very good sign to see from New England, a team that's young and building. They don't have the receiving threats, sure, but they do have 2 solid running backs, and obviously Antonio Gibson as a returner, and Hunter Henry as a tight end, so they're fine there. And they're fine when it comes to the trench work because Milton Williams is working out so far. And though without Christian Gonzalez, they were at least stable enough to keep Miami at bay when they needed to be kept at bay. New England, I don't think is a contender still, but I do think that's a promising sign that they were able to win in Miami in the way they did. It's Vegas. Didn't cause chargering. Geno Smith had one of those rough games to go with one of those pretty good games that he had in week 1. And to add to it, we also got Aston GT getting clamped up by the Charger defense. All right, that happens. How do the Raiders bounce back from this? That's going to be the more important thing that we'll need to know. They also had their opportunities. They just couldn't take advantage of them. That interception was pretty rough. And ultimately, they just didn't do enough to beat a Chargers team that's just simply better. No shame in this loss. You just lost to a better team. Dallas. DBs got cooked. All right, that was pretty brutal from the Dallas defense. 2 corners that got 10 NOs individually in particular seasons, and neither could have any answer for Malik Neighbors or Wan'Dale Robinson. And the fact that Russell Wilson threw for 400-plus yards, yikes, that's kind of bad. It's not a good look. Thankfully, you have maybe the best kicker in the league in Brandon Aubrey, but it's still not a good look that you guys got absolutely torched in your secondary. Decent run defense against Tyron Tracy, though. I will give you credit for that, but it was still a pretty brutal series of events, and you guys, again, got bailed out by Aubrey. Dallas, take your win and run. Your game against Chicago is incredibly important. Cincinnati, season in trouble. Yeah, we already know why. Joe Burrow is out for 3 months, and Jake Browning looked like a bit of a disaster with a bunch of NOs. Yet, when the money was on the table, he found a way. And he found a way to, well, Burrow did, found a way to get the ball to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Can Browning do that? He'll have to. And I still don't trust his defense enough to stop people from scoring on the other end. But Cincinnati, you're somehow 2-0. It's an ugly 2-0, but you're somehow undefeated. Take it and run. Pittsburgh, second half absence. Where was the offense that we had seen for, I would say, the first 6 quarters or so? It looked pretty good. It looked pretty efficient. And then the second half against Seattle started, and it looked non-existent. That's very concerning for a team that looked great in week 1, looked mediocre in week 2. Sure, Caleb Johnson gets laughed at, and we all are laughing at him still for the decision he made. But the offense only getting 3 points in the second half after being relatively productive against Seattle is, I think, the bigger concern. Jacksonville, 7-93. All you needed was a first down or get in the end zone from the 7-yard line, and you were good to go. And instead, it was no bueno. And you didn't get it, and then you got absolutely cooked on a 93-yard drive, and that was effectively the end of the proceedings as you lose with a few seconds to go. It's a brutal loss. It's an ugly loss. It's an avoidable loss. And to be honest, it's not great. It's a shame, too, because it wipes away what was a really good performance by Travis Etienne. I do want to see more from Brian Thomas and Trevor Lawrence, though. That would be quite nice to see going forward. And for Travis Hunter to not be bad enough to commit those penalties. That would also be good. Arizona, concerned about Marvin. All right, J.C. Horn is a really good corner. Understood. But that was kind of wild that he got clamped up the way he did. I'm not really feeling that. Not great. Still, Arizona did what they needed to do for a lot of this game. Even though they let Carolina back into it at the end, it was still a productive performance by the Cardinals. They're 2-0, yes. They play two of the worst teams in the league, yes. They will be tested coming up this week. I will talk about this game. But a little concerned that Marvin Harrison hasn't blown up quite yet. Sure, it takes time, but it's a little weird that he hasn't gone off or hasn't had that big time performance that says he's arrived. Sure, Drake McBride's great, but I just want to see a little bit more from Marvin Harrison Jr. and a little bit more from the defense in terms of being able to step on the necks of their opponents and keep it moving. Out of the games of interest in this tier, and it's Steelers-Patriots. This is not the Roethlisberger-Brady version of it, obviously. Can New England capitalize on the momentum they gained from winning last week in Miami? Can they keep Drake May vertical because of TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and company? Can the Steelers pass rush actually show up? Because they really haven't made an impact yet. And what about the Rodgers-led offense? Can he produce? And Christian Gonzalez, if he plays against DK Metcalf. That is television that I am very much interested in seeing. This is a pretty pivotal game for two teams that are 1-1. Let's see what happens.
And the other game in this tier I focused on is Texans-Jaguars. I told you I was going to talk about the Jaguars game at some point. Here it is. And here we go. The obvious mismatch that is Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen versus Houston's pitiful offensive line. I feel very bad for C.J. Stroud. However, when it comes to this game, Houston usually wins it, and Stroud usually plays spectacularly well. Jacksonville did get one last year in Houston, but when they play in Duval, usually it's Houston that destroys them. I am really concerned for Stroud, like I mentioned. As for Trevor Lawrence, can he and Brian Thomas get on a rapport? And how possible is it when you have Kwame Lassiter and or Derek Stingley Jr. covering Brian Thomas? That is a matchup I am very much looking forward to. Jacksonville ran the ball pretty well with Travis Etienne, and can Houston stop it? That's something else I'm also looking forward to seeing this Sunday. Let's get to the Wilmington, Delaware playoff tier. Seattle didn't squander gift. I mentioned the Caleb Johnson play. I think we've all mentioned the Caleb Johnson play. And from then on, Seattle dominated relatively easily a lot of the rest of this game. They took the punches from Pittsburgh early on, from the Metcalf tutty to the Ramsey Inno and various things that the Steelers did in the first half, and they counterpunched in the second half with a very impressive defensive performance. Seattle feels like a team that is going to be underwhelming in terms of name value and name recognition, but they're going to probably overwhelm the unsuspecting teams with how they play and how disciplined they can be when it comes to their offense and defense. They are well coached. I like Mike McDonald. Kansas City, not the same. I can't believe I have the Chiefs this low, but to be honest, they look like they are this low. And I say this because that offensive punch just isn't there. And I get it. Maybe part of that's because Rashee Rice isn't there, and maybe part of that's because Xavier Worthy isn't there. And Mahomes is trying his hardest to make plays, and Kelsey is trying his hardest to make plays. But it just doesn't hit the same. And they don't feel like they have that same punch that we've seen over the last decade from Reed and Mahomes and company. Will Kansas City be active in making a trade to get a receiver? They probably should. I'm not sure that they actually will. Defensively, they're okay. I think their defense is fine, but the offense just isn't hitting the same. Minnesota, pass rush. The good news is they have one. They have a really good one, and they are relentless in getting to the quarterback. Mike Penix took a beating on Sunday night. The bad news is they can't stop one, as J.J. McCarthy took a horrible beating in kind. And now McCarthy might not be playing, is probably out this week, and it's not looking great for him going forward health-wise. We want to see what happens going forward with J.J. McCarthy. Minnesota's offensive line is shockingly below average at best, and it's kind of weird because I kind of expected a little bit better from the Vikings O-line. Jefferson's been fine, and the rest of their offense is relatively okay. And I mentioned the defense. The defense is doing a respectably good job, especially over the last 5 quarters. But the offensive line is getting absolutely overwhelmed by decent pass rushers. Washington, it's about time. Now, I was going to say not quite there, thinking that there are levels in the NFC, and Washington's just not on the highest of levels yet. But I got to talk about this new stadium that's coming. And earlier today, saw that the Commanders and DC have officially approved and signed a deal on a $3.8 billion stadium. And it's going to be where RFK stood. They're going to revitalize the whole area, that whole deal. I love that. It should have been in DC all along. I am very happy to see that they're going to go back to Washington, D.C. in 4 years. Well, 2030 officially. I'm very happy to see that this is going to go down to start the 2030s. And that they don't have to play at FedEx Field anymore. I'm still going to call it FedEx Field. They don't have to play there anymore. I'm very happy about that. I have been to FedEx Field. It was very mid. It was a very below average. Not great. But the point is, I'm happy that they're going back there. I'm happy that they're going back to where their home should have been the entire time. That's the site of RFK. And I hope they do well with that stadium. I hope the renderings that I've seen a few months ago are what the stadium will look like. I hope that's the case. Great work, Washington. Not on the field against the Packers last Thursday night, but great work in terms of getting that stadium and your team back to Washington, D.C. proper. San Francisco, solid Mac Jones. That's not a sentence I quite thought I would say at any given point. But in any event, I gotta say, good work. Mac Jones was efficient. He didn't make mistakes. He didn't do anything stupid. He didn't get sent to the shadow realm by a ready and willing defensive lineman. No, he was just good. And there's no problem with that. There's no shame in that. Juwan Jennings benefited, sure. Christian McCaffrey did CMC things. And Mac Jones didn't crash the car, which at this point is what the Niners need. And that's a very good look. I think that's a very good look for San Francisco. As if they can get healthy, that would be a much better look. But in the meantime, between time, good work, Mac Jones. Again, a sentence I never thought I would say. Denver, brutal loss. We already know why. We've already seen the highlights a million times. It was the leverage play. The Bo Nix Inno was bad. The missed kick was also bad. But the leverage play will obviously be the play that stings. And if for some reason there's a tiebreaker at the end of the year between Denver and Indianapolis, that's not going to go well for the Broncos. And because of that, the simple fact that Indy still hasn't punted yet, it's one thing to do that against Miami and how bad their defense has been. It's another to do that against Denver and how we all think of the Broncos defense, where the Colts did not punt against the Broncos. That's alarming. And maybe that's more Colts than Broncos, but that's a little concerning to me. Detroit, a dominant performance. Back to what we've seen over the last few years with Jared Goff and company, where they would show up, their guys are better than your guys, their offensive line's tougher than your defensive line, and they just straight bully you and say, go ahead, try and score with us. Chicago could not score with them. And everybody got a piece, with the exception of Sam Laporta. Pretty much everybody else ate. And that's fine. I think that's the way this is going to go and go well when Detroit is playing well. I do wonder about them against real defenses. They're going to face one on Monday. I will absolutely talk about that game. In Atlanta, actual pass rushers. The Falcons' defensive line is actually causing chaos. As I mentioned with the Vikings, their defensive line brought a whole lot of pain and brought it in a whole lot of ways. They didn't make Baker's life easy either in week 1, which is a very good sight to see. It's good work drafting both those rookies, Jalen Walker and James Pierce. Both those guys are doing a pretty solid job off the edges. And Doris is also handling his interior-wise. I like what I'm seeing from Atlanta. Mike Penix isn't making too many mistakes, which is good. And obviously the skill guys are doing their thing. The offensive line's a little spotty, sure. And they'll look bad against a really good pass rushing kind in Minnesota. But I like thus far what I'm seeing from the Falcons. They're also not falconing. I really don't blame them as much for losing to Tampa Bay the way they did. Younghoe Koo simply missed a kick. It's unfortunate that he's hurt, though. Let's get to the playoff tier games of interest. Cardinals, Niners. All right, Arizona, now you're about to go into the shallow end of the pool. You're not facing bad teams this week. Although you might not face Brock Purdy and may face Mac Jones instead, you're at least not facing a bad team. Where do you stand, Arizona? Robert Saleh, do you have enough guys to go after Kyler Murray? Normally, the Niners handle business in this game and handle business rather easily. They usually dominate this game, at least when they're healthy. Last year, they really weren't, and Arizona effectively stole the first game and then won the second one. And it was kind of impressive on the Cardinals to do that. Where do the Cardinals stand? I think we're going to know a lot about Arizona after this week. Broncos-Chargers. On one hand, Denver, I think, has a better roster. On the other, I think the Chargers have far and away a better coach and far and away a better quarterback. There's no shame on Sean Payton and Bo Nix. It's just the fact that Justin Herbert has played really well so far, and Jim Harbaugh knows what he's doing and has been a great fixture for Herbert and company and rebuilding the culture that the Chargers so desperately needed. Even without Rashawn Slater, that offensive line's holding together really well. Can Denver get home and cause chaos to Herbert? That is something that we're really going to need to see if the Broncos are going to win this game. Can Bo Nix avoid the Mo picks? Because he has not avoided them in the first 2 weeks of this season. The Chargers defense is opportunistic enough to take the picks and get innos or cause fumble recoveries, all that good stuff. Can they do that this week? Something that we're looking forward to. And I never thought I'd say this, but Quentin Johnston versus PS2. Something I'm looking forward to seeing when they actually are matched up. Now, I expect PS2 to cover Keenan Allen more often, which that's the way I would go here if I'm the Broncos. But there will be times, I'm sure, that PS2 is going to match up with Quentin Johnston. Will Herbert throw in that direction when that happens? Something I am looking forward to seeing. And now, of course, the New York City title tier. Tampa Bay, Baker carrying ship. Baker's effectively carried the ship for the first 2 weeks, and he's basically doing it while getting cannonballs fired at him. Their offensive line is in shambles, and a lot of injuries all over the place. Like, you got people playing out of position, and Houston feasted the entire night until the very end when they couldn't somehow tackle him. But Baker is finding a way to carry Tampa Bay to 2-0, and 2 weeks in, I know it's obviously very early, people are going to say he's an MVP candidate, and to be honest, I would agree with him. Indianapolis, still no punts. They played 120 minutes of actual football, and they have not punted even once. Well, technically it was one punt, but it was called back due to a penalty on the Dolphins. So they technically punted once, but it will not show in the record books. Daniel Jones has been at the stable QB that they have needed badly over these first 2 weeks, and we can't even say it was against just Miami because they did it to a really good Denver defense. Jonathan Taylor's done his thing. That offensive line's holding together strong. And the defense, though they lack in the name talent, their game has picked up and have done really well for themselves. The Colts might be serious. And with the AFC South in disarray like it is, they might have a very serious lead by the end of the month. LA Rams revitalized Devontae Adams. He has looked good these first 2 weeks. Now, Puka Nacua obviously will get the lion's share of the praise, but Devontae Adams has looked really good these previous 2 weeks in Los Angeles. Maybe that's just what he needed, was a stable organization. The Rams are one of those. The fact that Kyren Williams didn't score a touchdown like he seems to do every week is a little surprising, but they didn't need him to. All they needed to do was not give Tennessee short fields, and they were perfectly fine, which is effectively what happened here. They got to Cam Ward enough, their offense did just enough, despite a couple turnovers, and they were generally in good shape. Good job, Rams. Baltimore, Royal off day. We didn't really hear much from Derrick Henry, and maybe that's because the Browns defense did something productive. We didn't have to, because Lamar Jackson made sure that he's going to take it from here, and he did. And so did the Ravens defense, because Roquan Smith was an absolute menace the entire day. We got the NL there by Nick Wiggins, as he almost took it back to the crib. The Ravens defense did what they were supposed to do, which is beat up the Browns, which is what they're supposed to do. Baltimore should be 2-0. We all know this. But the Ravens, I think, are going to be fine as long as they don't make mistakes. That is the key for every Ravens game and every Ravens performance. Don't beat yourselves. LA Chargers, very disciplined team. They're not charging. They're not making dumb mistakes. They're just very disciplined. They're just playing smart, efficient football, which is what you needed from the Chargers and what you kind of honestly expect from a Jim Harbaugh coach team. They're just really disciplined and very good. And that's impressive considering what we've seen of the Chargers and a lot of the guys that are still there over the last few years. Keenan Allen is as reliable as it gets and probably the NFL's most reliable receiver, because him on third down, you might as well just chalk it up and just move the sticks, because he is lights out when it comes to that. Quentin Johnston actually has hands now, and that's really bad for everybody else because that takes pressure off of said Allen. Now, I'd like to see the run game get a little bit better, but ultimately, Herbert and company are doing their job, and that's a very good look so far for the LA Chargers. Green Bay, another powerful statement. The second straight week, and pretty much twice in 4 days, they played two playoff teams and two high-powered offenses. Last year, the Lions had the best offense in football. The Commanders were fifth. The Packers have played them both in 4 days and absolutely clamped them both up. And Jared Goff was running for his life the entire day, and Jaden Daniels could get nothing done until the very end. Jordan Love and company are handling their business, and another early MVP candidate is Jordan Love. Tucker Kraft has been outstanding thus far. It's probably been the league's best tight end through 2 weeks. And the receivers are doing their thing. Josh Jacobs is doing his part as a supplementary piece. But this pass rush is absolutely ridiculous right now. Rashawn Gary and Micah Parsons and then Lucas Van Ness and everybody coming from all sides from Green Bay, making life so much easier for a Packer defense that needed an elite talent to headline it. And Micah's doing his part, and everybody else is feeding off the attention that he gets. Green Bay's serious, and they're going to pose a threat to everybody that they're going to see later on this year just because of the way they play. Buffalo, hammers and nails. That's kind of what the Bills are when Josh Allen isn't doing dumb stuff against the Jets. When they've played the Jets in his career, he has basically mauled them and destroyed them at almost every turn. And not just him, him and James Cook, especially this time. But they've kind of destroyed the Jets for a lot of their careers. They've done the same to the Dolphins, as I just mentioned with the game of interest there. They have done a lot of destructive things to both those two teams over their careers. Now, this week will be a little tougher without Matt Milano and Ed Oliver, but the Bills effectively had a bye week when they destroyed the Jets without much of a problem. And Philadelphia will stay number one. Sketchy brotherly shove. I think we've all said this for years when it comes to that, and the people don't like the play. Me personally, I'm okay with the play as long as it's clean, because that's a you got to stop it situation. As it turns out, we may have found a reason why it is so unstoppable. The Eagles seem to jump and get false starts without getting called for them or getting caught for them. And Tom Brady / the Chiefs sort of pointed it out. And apparently the Eagles had to fall back on it. And now the brotherly shove may be in a little bit of trouble because the Eagles can't effectively run it without jumping and false starting. Can the Eagles cancel that out, their most dominant, destructive play? Now, defensively, they looked better. Not perfect, but better against the Chiefs. There's still some work to be done, and I'm concerned about their next opponent that I'm going to talk about right now. Rams-Eagles. We're going to start the games of interest in this title tier. This was a really good playoff game last year, and I've said this a few times. Had it not been for the snow, to be honest, I think the Rams would have beat them. I think the Rams would have beat them because there was no answer from the Eagles' offensive line against the Rams' defensive line. There was no answers for that. Jalen Hurts took a horrible beating, even with Saquon Barkley going ham twice against the Rams. Once in the divisional round, once in LA, where he ran for 200 plus in both games. It was absolutely absurd what Saquon Barkley was doing. Even with all of that, that Rams defensive line absolutely terrorized Jalen Hurts in the playoff game. And they were 15 yards away from winning said game until Jalen Carter saved the day. And this is even with the snow and the fumbles by Stafford and Kyron Williams. But this time, the Rams now have a second receiver in Devontae Adams to collab with Puka Nacua against the Eagles secondary that I've mentioned has not looked great. If Stafford has enough time in the pocket, can he get business done against this secondary? The key question part of that is obviously, will Stafford have enough time? As for the Eagles offensive line versus the Rams D-line, have the Eagles learned how to deal with Jared Verse and company? That will be a big part of this game. Over under $125 for Saquon against the Rams defense, because I want to see if the Rams have learned anything. And of course, the main event this week is the Monday night game, and it's my Super Bowl pick. Lions, Ravens, a really good offense, a really good defense. Normally, Lamar against the NFC is as rock solid as it gets. He don't lose to the NFC. He usually never does. Matter of fact, they played a couple years ago, the Lions and Ravens did, and the Ravens could absolutely mauled the Lions. It was a horrible beating that Jared Goff and company took. This game, like the previous, is in Baltimore again, and that is another concern.
Jared Goff at home, I trust him a lot. Jared Goff on the road against a good team is a little spotty. I'm going to need to see the Lions' offense really do their part here. And obviously their defense against Henry and company. Will Henry do his thing like he probably should against the Lions' defense, which is still kind of sketchy to me. I kind of want to see if Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry on another big stage can do their thing like they did against Buffalo. And Baltimore, I want to see if you can not make mistakes, or at least not self-destruct if you have a big lead. That would probably be nice. And there you have it. That's this week's power rankings. Obviously, tomorrow, like I've mentioned many times, I'm going to do the picks. They will be on the Sports Lounge page. You can find them there. And I will post the link below when the picks are ready. Miami and Buffalo, you'll be the first stop of my next train of thought.